Ache Willow. Chapter 5. Mistakes were made. I've certainly made my share of mistakes in my life. A long time ago when my mom set me loose in the kitchen for the first time. Wait, no, I'm lying. A long time ago, Mom left me with a babysitter, and while she was asleep, I took control of the kitchen for the first time. We all have our origin story, and this is mine. I may not have been bitten by a radioactive KitchenAid, but I think that was the day I opened my senses to the greater possibilities that cooking offered. It all began with a video on the internet that I was determined on imitating. In it, disembodied hands made in 2 minutes an assortment of delicious butter cookies that look like tiny unicorns complete with rainbow glitter inside. At 4 years old, I had no idea what I was doing, only that I had to mix butter, 2 types of white powder. I chose salt instead of flour, but I got the sugar right, and some number of eggs. Fortunately, I was stopped before I could turn the oven on, but not before I started the mixer at maximum speed, painting the walls and ceiling with what would have been the most noxious cookies ever. To become a great chef is my destiny, but my first steps were a disaster, and, as I've made clear, it wasn't my last. When Detective Aaron Wilson asked me where I was during the night a woman was gruesomely murdered behind the Ache Willow Cafe, it was the first step in a string of mistakes that landed me in this interrogation room. I was right here, I answered, not even suspecting that he might check if I had an alibi. I'm not dumb, I swear, but I was exhausted and still in the haze of trauma. Detective Wilson nodded, as if I was just confirming something he already knew. Was anyone here with you? Oh, yes, Olivia Figg was here. I slept at her place after we... I cut myself short as Wilson's eyebrows shot up midway through my sentence. A little panicked, I scanned the dining area for Olivia. She hadn't followed me into the cafe, yet somehow I still expected to see her there. Instead, I saw the so-called Inquisition glaring at me from their table. 2 well-dressed women, each sitting opposite at a table split with a red and blue line separating the dining area between the U.S. and Canada, also looked in my direction. There was a trio of white-robed gentlemen who I remember buying only tea, making a point that they avoid caffeine at all costs. I didn't care to explain how tea still contains significant amounts of the offending chemical. But Olivia was nowhere to be seen. Is there something you're not telling me, Miriam? The detective wore his best, helpful, keeper-of-the-peace face, and with all the strange eyes digging into me, I fell for it. There was a noise in the alley last night, I whispered, forcing him to lean in. Scared me half to death. That's why I slept at the Fig place. A noise? He asked, his voice also dropping. What kind of noise? A scary noise. Suddenly, I was aware of the age difference between us. I felt like a child admitting to being afraid of an open closet door in a dark bedroom. I thought back to the babysitter who woke up to the sound of an out-of-control mixer and a screaming child. How she'd asked me what had happened and all I could do was answer in vague terms, terrified about what would happen next. Would you mind coming down to the station to give a statement about what you heard? I shook my head, feeling the floor dropping from under me. 24 hours prior, I was bored out of my skull listening to Helen Edna prattle on about succession and last will and testaments. Now I was neck-deep in a murder investigation while operating a business I may not actually own. I can't just close the coffee shop, was the excuse I gave. Do you have a permit to run this place? Was the question that broke me. No, but it's fine. You told me to open it up and make coffee for you and your people. That makes it okay, right? I heard the naivete in my voice as I spoke the words, fully aware at that time that I had been played. I don't have that kind of authority, he said with a broad smile. But if you close up now and come with me, answer a few questions, I can make sure you don't get in trouble for it. He said all that in the open, out loud, for the whole cafe to hear. The inquisitors were the first to empty their cups and file out of the Aquilo. Soon the middle-aged women followed. Then, and without Detective Wilson having to say another word, the whole cafe drained itself of patrons and customers. I sat there, letting it happen until I was left alone with him. That was my second mistake. Can't I answer your questions here? I thought he was on my side. He'd cleverly tricked me into occupying my mind with coffee and cookies and figuring out the antique register. He was a servant of the peace. Surely he had my best interests in mind. But he wasn't manipulating me for my own good. He was keeping me close at hand, easy to find and manageable. Then he tricked me into this compromising position, maneuvered me into a place of vulnerability. Instead of fighting back, all I could do was fidget with my shirt sleeve and try to brush away flour covering my blue jeans like spilled snow. Detective Wilson, acting helpful, picked up a few plates and mugs left behind by the departing customers. He offered a crooked smile, as if giving the option serious consideration, but soon shook his head. And that was it. Now I'm sitting in an interrogation room, in another country, across the cold, stainless steel table from a detective who already showed duplicity. My will has been eroded by trauma, trickery, and half a cup of terrible machine coffee. To their credit, everyone at the station on this side of the border has been very pleasant. While the coffee feels like torture, it's really the best they had to offer, and they did give me the option of having some candy or chips from another machine. Don't I get a phone call? It's the first question that comes to mind as I begin to realize where I am, how I got here, and the magnitude of my mistake. You're not under arrest, Wilson answers, sipping his own coffee while sitting backwards on his chair. Of course not, so I guess I get as many phone calls as I want, but I request none. Am I a suspect? The question comes coated in disbelief, but he smiles and shakes his head. No, of course not. Like I said, I have a few questions and I might need to take an official statement. Do you mind if we record this? I shake my head. What could he possibly think I have to say that would have any weight on his investigation? There's an uncomfortable silence as he fusses with the machine. It's a genuine old-style tape recorder. Detective Wilson might be older than I am, but even he seems baffled by the near-obsolete technology. I use that moment to sip at my oily black coffee. Better that than endure the awkward silence. All right, he says, victorious after pushing a button and setting the tape whirring. Then it dawns on me that the entire station is like that tape recorder. A slice of time from the past. Security cameras in the corner are big and bulky with big red lights that blink every second. The computers on each desk have large CRT monitors instead of sleek flat screens. Even Wilson's Impala is at least 2 decades old. This isn't a police station. It's a museum. So, first, I want to apologize for my ruse. It wasn't really intentional, you know. You looked rattled, and I wanted to keep you busy while I did some digging. I want to think he's looking genuinely apologetic, but he's spent every last ounce of my trust. Both my hands hold the styrofoam cup to my lips, hiding the lower half of my face so he can't read my expression. I doubt it's effective, but it's all I've got. Digging about what? About you, of course. He leans forward, eager and hungry, not for answers, not yet. No, he's hungry to tell me what he's found. I can't imagine what sort of investigation he could have done. Did he call my parents or school? Maybe he contacted Trevor and Cindy. He looks like he thinks he's found some secret I want to keep hidden. And if that's the case, he's in for some serious disappointment. The most sordid thing about me is the state of my life in the last few months. My worst crime is underage drinking, and that's only because I've been cooking with rum and wine since I was 12. See, I didn't understand who you were at first. The Aquilo's been empty for 4 months now. I half expected they'd be putting up boards in the window any day now. The image strikes an unexpected chord. The Aquilo? Boarded up like some vulgar, out-of-business fast food joint? That didn't seem right. I may not have known Doris, but she clearly cared about the place. It would have broken her heart to see it like that. But I saw the resemblance, and a few calls confirmed you were the previous owner's great-grandniece? He ends in a question, but he already knows the answer. He probably got that information from Helen Edna. See? I can play detective too. Why didn't you just ask? I've got nothing to hide. He sits back, still eager and still hungry, but no less excited about his impressive police work. Detective, I ask, what is all this about? You said you had questions. You're right. I apologize. He shuffles on his seat, getting more comfortable as if he's settling in for a long time. I notice the weapon in his shoulder holster. Without the raincoat, it's obvious. Maybe this kind of thing is a common sight on this side of the border, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone carrying a weapon around like that. Let me get to the point, he says, leaning back. What do you know about Edward Gulliver Kemper? Nothing. I expect my answer to be a huge disappointment to the detective. After all the efforts he put into bringing me in and cornering me, he'll have nothing to show for it. I don't even have to stretch the truth. I barely know the guy, I add for emphasis, seeing that my initial statement lacks the desired effect. Instead of disappointment, it's mischievous curiosity that stretches over Detective Wilson's face. It does not suit him well. It makes him look petty and mean, dissipating any last vestige of the trust I initially felt for him. His right hand extends over the table and his fingers drum over the cold metallic surface, insinuating that he's giving my answer some thought. The way he fixes me with his blue eyes, however, I know he's already got a solid idea of what comes next. Are you sure about that? He asks, asking like this is my chance to come clean. I don't know what he expects. He's a man expecting a vichyssoise at the soup kitchen and completely misjudging the source he's drawing from. I've met him once. No, twice. Both times yesterday. We didn't really form a deep bond. Right, but he does the deliveries at your great-grandaunt's cafe, correct? I only offer a nod, and even that I spike with as much vinegar as a simple gesture can convey. There's little mystery to what he's insinuating. Gulliver did deliveries for Doris. I'm related to Doris, ergo and therefore I too have a relationship with Gulliver. 2 days ago, I didn't even know I had a relative in Aquilo. Hell, I laugh nervously. I didn't even know there was a place called Aquilo. He flips through a few more pages in his file, pulling out a printout of a chat window. He doesn't do it so much with a flourish as he does with slow deliberation. He slides the page over the brushed steel surface of the table, but before it's even close to me, I can recognize the pixelated logo at the top. It's a screenshot of my conversation with Gulliver from 2 days ago, when I was still looking for a ride to Aquilo. I don't know why you're showing me this. If anything, it proves that I didn't know Gulliver before then. Wilson's smirk gains in intensity, and he pushes the page almost into my lap. You're not thinking like a detective, he says. Don't you think it's a bit of a coincidence that the man who's been doing deliveries for Doris Dufour is the same one to give her great-grandniece a lift into Aquilo? No, I don't. Outrage boils over, overtaking my fear and anxiety. He makes it sound like somehow I'm in cahoots with Gulliver over something. The more he digs, the more he looks desperate to find this connection between me and the murders. But desperation is a dangerous emotion. It makes people reckless and stupid, but also aggressive and unreasonable. If Wilson is desperate enough to cast me as a player in his theory, there's little I can do to stop him. I feel like I'm a million miles from Canada, even though the border is only a few blocks away. I want to be out of here, but if I leave, it'll just confirm his suspicions, and I don't want to have Detective Wilson hovering over my shoulder and putting his nose into everything I do in this town. I'm pretty sure people doing the Montreal-Aquilo Drive are few and far between, I explain. Then I stab my finger at the logo on the top of the page. And this is a very popular ride-sharing site. It was the top result in my search. So, assuming Gulliver wants to make a few extra bucks, it's perfectly logical that he'd keep an eye on that site. Seemingly defeated, Detective Wilson pulls the page back from across the table with one finger, sliding it back into his file folder. He closes the file, putting it back at the corner of the table. I expect him to stand, open the door, apologize, and let me be on my way. Instead, he leans back again. How much did the ride set you back? Pardon? How much did he charge you for the ride to Aquilo? Nothing. I don't say it, but the answer is obvious from my expression. Blank and with my lips slightly parted, I let the word hang on the tip of my tongue before swallowing it back. I assume you've heard about the string of murders happening in town. Again, I let my features do the talking. It's amazing how much a blank, stunned stare can communicate. The first murder, he goes through his file again, pulling out a photograph of a young woman barely a few years my senior. It's blown up from a candid family photo, the kind taken at a gathering or party. Happened a little less than 4 months ago. Her name was Candace Emery. She was about to move down to Colorado to get a degree in engineering. Can you tell me what else happened about 4 months ago? I know the answer to that. After all this badgering, trickery, and deception, I finally see where he's going, and I find myself relating to Wilson. I don't like coincidences either. Doris passed away, I say. He nods, but there's no satisfaction in it. He's taking me on a journey, feeding me the ingredients so I can cook the story myself. I know he can't get to the conclusion and accuse me of anything without making some stunning leap in logic, but until I've gone through the whole recipe, I won't know what he's cooking either. It's not something that made it to the papers, but it's also not a very well-kept secret, so maybe you've heard. Where did all the murders happen? I haven't heard, but I can put it together myself. If we're making a cake, I know at some point we'll be using flour. Near the Aquilo Cafe? Within 2 blocks, he confirms. I swallow hard. What did I inherit from Doris? I can see why Detective Wilson is drawing all these links between the cafe and these murders, and, by extension, everyone associated with it. Suddenly, Gulliver's jokes about his name seem so much more prophetic. Do you want to take a break, Miss Dufour? My discomfort is obvious, but his offer is cold, and I can tell he doesn't want me to take it. Part of me wants to say yes, just to spite him. Hell, didn't he say I wasn't a suspect, that I could just walk out of here? Or will he officially arrest me the moment I try to exercise that right? It's funny how, even after watching so many American crime dramas, I know next to nothing about the actual workings of the U.S. judicial system and my rights within it. I shake my head and set my jaw, intent on signaling that I'm not ready to waver. Good, he says, satisfied. I've only got one more question to ask anyways. Do you know how Doris Dufour died? She had a stroke. She was old and had a stroke. That's what the letter from Helen Edna said, and it's what we always expect old people to die from. That or a heart attack. If that were true, however, I don't think Detective Wilson would be asking me if I knew the cause of death. Was she another victim of whoever was killing people in Aquilo? Did Helen Edna lie to me? If Gulliver is indeed the one behind the murders, does that mean he killed Doris? The questions tumbled out of my mind and crowd themselves in my throat. I'm no longer so much afraid of the detective as I am of everything else in this small, weird village. There's one question that manages to bully its way in front of the others. Strengthened by urgency and suspicion and perhaps some amount of paranoia, it finds its way to my tongue, spilling forth in a quivering mess. I start, stop, swallow, then start again. Is Gulliver stalking me? Detective Wilson's face melts back to the expression I first saw him wear. It's the weathered compassion of a man trying to comfort a girl who just saw her first dead body. This time, he's looking for a way to tell me that I am, indeed, being stalked by a large, menacing stranger, a man who may very well have killed my great-grandaunt. He tries to break the silence. I see him begin to lean forward and open his mouth when a knock on the door interrupts him. There's no time for Wilson to answer before it swings open. Bright lights from the corridor and bullpen outside flood into the interrogation room, reminding me of how dark it is in here. Cut from the bright neon glow, I recognize a familiar silhouette. Clad in a smart business skirt, clean and crisp jacket hanging from her arm, Helen Edna, notary public, walks into the room. Even the officer escorting her looks intimidated. What do you think you're doing, Aaron? Detective Wilson doesn't seem so much surprised as exasperated. He doesn't even bother to get up, but instead quickly gathers the photo of Candace Emery, clutching his file folder like a precious treasure. Questioning a person of interest, he answers, all sign of compassion replaced by confidence and defiance. Questioning a minor without the presence of a legal guardian, Helen retorts, taking my wrist and pulling me to my feet. What? I'm an adult, I protest, indignant. Not here, you're not, and before you say anything, trust me, it's better that you aren't. The words are for me, but Helen Edna's attention is on Detective Wilson. The notary public never seemed capable of much emotion when I first met her, apart from aloof contempt. Staring down at Wilson, she seems to be drizzling hate on top of him. This is her interrogation room now, and the way she pulls my wrist, Helen Edna is intent on getting me out of it. You're not a lawyer, Helen, Wilson says, standing up to attempt and reassert his authority. I am not, Aaron, but do you want me to call one? Not sending in a lawyer, or calling your district attorney for that matter, is a courtesy. You may want to consider enjoying it quietly while it lasts. And with that, we were on our way out, leaving a rather stunned and rattled Detective Wilson behind. It turns out I was right. Helen Edna, notary public, does drive a boring, neutral-colored BMW. Where I was wrong, however, was assuming that she was some stereotypical emotionless pencil pusher. Helen Edna is capable of feeling, and not just the frustrated annoyance she showed me in Gulliver. Under the right conditions, she can summon up a focused rage strong enough to broil even the resolve of a grown man. Seat belt, she says, stern and uncompromising. What the hell were you thinking? I strap in before answering. I don't have a good answer, and I certainly do not want her white-hot fury turned in my direction. Fortunately, my silence seems to be enough, or maybe she never really cared what excuses I was going to have, but only wanted a setup to lay into me. I gave you the key to the Aquilo as a courtesy, not so you could open up for business. And following Aaron across the border, do you have any idea how much trouble you could have gotten yourself into? Her tone is damn near parental. She sounds like my mom when I mess up. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed, seems to be the underlying theme to her thesis. I saw a dead body. The words spill forth, cold and sluggish. I just don't know what else to say. Whenever I think of my current predicament and the situation Helen saved me from, all I see is the body behind the Aquilo, missing guts and all. At the station? Helen asks, her indignation flaring up anew. No. Behind the cafe. That's why I started baking and serving coffee. It was Detective Wilson's idea. A way to keep me distracted from thinking about it. A moment bleeds away in silence. We pass from the U.S. side of town and into the Canadian side. There's no checkpoint, no border control, no customs. Feels almost unnatural to have no authorities enforcing any form of border security. I'll have to ask how that works sometime. I'm sorry you went through that, Helen says, navigating the narrow streets of Aquilo, winding her way towards Rue Principale. It must have been traumatic. I have some news that might cheer you up, though. The car stops about a block away from the Aquilo Cafe. I can see it on the side of the road. The green wooden sign is already illuminated, though twilight remains half an hour away. Ambulances, police cars, and the crowd of thirsty clients are all gone. A tiny man with a dog twice his size walks by the cafe and stops to look in the window, but the strange pair moves on after a few seconds. Everything looks so normal. No one would suspect a woman was murdered only a few dozen feet from where we're parked. The doors to the BMW stay locked and the engine keeps running as Helen Edna, notary public, pulls out her briefcase from the back. She fusses for a few seconds before pulling out a file folder that reminds me of Detective Wilson's precious papers. Digging further into her bureaucratic Russian doll, Helen finally presents the fruits of her labor. More paper. Here you go, she says, as close to triumphant as she can be. What are these? I leaf through the clean white sheets of paper, each a tapestry of letters and bullet points, none of which I feel intellectually or emotionally equipped to understand on my own. Still, I frown and flip through the pile, doing my best impression of someone who gets it. It's not enough. These, Helen says, pulling out a stack of stapled documents, are the permits to operate the Aquilo. I just had to renew them and update them to your name. This is to confirm that you are indeed Miriam Dufour, daughter of Alain Dufour, son of Adolphe Dufour, son of Xavier Dufour, brother of Doris Dufour. This makes it official. The Aquilo Café is yours. The file folder suddenly feels so much heavier, like the trees that went into making the pulp that went into each page weighs into my hands. It's real. The inheritance is real, and the beautiful Aquilo Café is mine. I don't know that I can say my problems are solved, and it's going to be a while before everything is settled and I can start pushing my dreams forward again. But considering that less than 2 days ago all my ambitions were crumbling to dust, this is an enormous victory. Why? The question hides my choking on emotions. Because, Helen says, looking down the street ahead of us, Doris was my friend and a pillar of the community that I hold dear. She helped me through some of the darkest times of my life the same way she did for so many others here. It's no exaggeration when I say that when she died, part of this town's soul went with her. Maybe my hopes are misplaced, but I think that perhaps you can replace her a little. Be that missing pillar before the roof comes down on us. There's a pause, then I hear the doors click unlocked. I want to ask Helen Edna how Doris really died. Having the whole line of family members that link me to her spelled out painted a picture of how old the woman was, but Detective Wilson all but said it wasn't a stroke that took her. However, I can't bring myself to put the words together, not after such a heartfelt speech from Helen. So, apparently she's capable of more than frustration and the occasional rage. Under the right circumstances, Helen Edna, Notary Public, can damn near pull the tears straight from my eyes. Thank you, I say, clutching the file folder close to my chest and opening the passenger door. She swallows hard before pulling the key from the ignition. We both step out of her car, and a chill wind tussles our hair. I need to go lock up the office for the night, she says, holding her briefcase by her side. Do you need anything else? I think about it, but I can't come up with anything. The papers in my hand allow me to either open up the Aquilo tomorrow morning and start serving cookies and lattes to the town residents, or shop around for a real estate agent to unload the property for me while I head back to Montreal. Then it hits me. Just one thing. The key Doris gave Gulliver. Does it also open the apartment above? She frowns, and I can see questions taking form behind her eyes. Her own dislike for Gulliver does nothing but fuel my own apprehension towards him. No, just the cafe. I sigh in relief. Knowing his access is restricted makes me feel a little better. At least I have a safe place to sleep. I hope. The Aquilo is just as I left it. Dirty dishes on the counter next to the register and a pile of filthy mugs and cups crowding the sink and waiting to be put into the dishwasher. Flour covers the kitchen counter like a dusting of snow on a late November morning. The trash bins are full and the floor is covered in dust tracked from outside. This isn't the most glamorous part of owning and operating a food establishment, but it's one that needs to get done. Besides, once I've put everything away, once the floors are clean, the counter's tidy, and the dishwasher humming, I'll be able to start baking a few things for the morning. Preparing a few batches of cinnamon rolls and scones will do me good. Cooking has a therapeutic effect on me that borders on magic. I whistle some random tune as I busy myself going back and forth between the dining area and the kitchen. I dance with the mop after I've put all the chairs on the tables and paint the counters clean using wet rags. By the time I'm done and ready to fire up the oven, night is teasing the sky with shadows stretched across it. Then I notice it. The back door, the gateway to where I saw my first dead body, is open. It's only by a crack, but twilight seems to spill out now that I've noticed. Has it been open since I got here? Did someone sneak in here while I was filling the dishwasher? I walk up to close the door, my hand visibly shaking. The memory of the dead body, along with the forbidding darkness from behind the cafe, make me wary of getting too close to the alley. But curiosity is too strong. My hands close on the doorknob, and where it could have pushed the door shut and twisted the lock, instead it pulls it open, allowing light from the dining area to illuminate the 2 green dumpsters at the back. The body is gone. The yellow tape is gone. If I didn't know better, I'd never have guessed that a murder victim had been found here this very morning. In fact, the only thing that's out of place is a fresh, clean box of salt lying flat on the ground next to the dumpster. I walk up to inspect it. It's one of the boxes from the kitchen, the top corner chewed open. The stupid raccoons must have stolen it thinking it was food. The look on their faces when they found nothing but salt must have been hilarious. The thought brings a smirk to my face. I only jump a little at the sound from the closest dumpster. Speaking of stupid raccoons. The large one from yesterday is sticking his big fat body out of the top of the metal container, standing atop a pile of rubbish. His back is arched and his fur is standing on end. I can clearly see his fangs as he snarls with an angry, spitting sound. "Hey, you're the one stealing from me, buddy." He hisses again, but not at me. Instead, his beady little eyes are fixated into the distance, staring at the copse of trees beyond the alley. A cold wind picks up my hair again, and a chill runs up my spine. I follow the fat raccoon's gaze, and to my horror, I see the same shambling man from yesterday stumbling between the trees and towards the Aquilo Cafe. Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow, narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or your preferred podcast platform. You have no idea how much it helps. Questions, comments? Email us at aquilo@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.